Today is a bloody special episode. Excited for a long time to try and get Ashok Parekh into the studio. Thank you very much for joining me, mate.
He came back to Ireland and said, look, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is I'm going to Australia. Bad news, I can't afford to take you over. So you're on your own. How do you survive in a situation where I became best friend of the biggest, roughest, toughest people in the whole school, and I never got in one fight. So I left there with 26 Irish blokes, and I went to Hereford, which is a centre of the SAS and RAF. We drank where the SAS were, and they started beating up all the Irish blokes. Look, I'll go to Kalgoorlie and set up my own accounting firms. Everybody saw the ads. And when you go down the streets, they're, oh, you're the dickhead on TV.
Was there the Kalgoorlie mafia?
I've got people bring me up saying, look, you'll never do well here unless you're friends of ours. But I've always treated people exactly like I want to be treated.
Born in Dublin, arriving in Australia as a young immigrant with very little, starting work in the mines and going on to build multiple businesses across accounting, hospitality and mining. This is not just a story about business. It's a story about resilience, migration, work ethic, and backing yourself when nothing is guaranteed. This is part one of a two-part series with Ashok Parekh. Welcome back to the Gold Room podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Today is a bloody special episode. I've been excited for a long time to try and get Ashok Parekh into the studio. We've finally done it. Thank you very much for joining me, mate.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Mate, you have done so much for the mining industry. You've done so much for Kalgoorlie and Western Australia as a whole. So, look, I thank you. A lot of people will watch this episode because you're on here. The King of Kalgoorlie.
Well, I would rather be the King of Kalgoorlie than the King of England at the moment after last night.
Or was that Prince Andrew's little saga?
Yeah.
Not good,
I'd rather be in Kalgoorlie.
Yeah, for sure, mate, for sure. Look, Ashok, as you know, we start every episode with the life and the times. Let's take it back to the early years. How far back can you remember?
Well, look, I was born and brought up in Dublin, in Ireland, in 1956. My dad went to Ireland. He's Indian to do the medicine. He married an Irish woman, had 3 kids.
From what part of India?
My dad was originally from Bombay, but he went to live in Durban, and then he decided to go to Ireland to do medicine, met an Irish girl, got married, had 3 kids, but he never told his parents he was married.
Wow, how did that go down when they found out?
It didn't go down too well because they wanted an arranged marriage.
Of course.
And he never told them he was married.
Love conquers all, mate.
That's exactly right. So I lived in Ireland, and then what happened when I was 4 years old, 3 and a half, my dad went to East Africa, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, with my mother. And at 4 years old, my mum died. So what happened then was...
she died while she was in Africa?
Africa, yeah. So and we had...
How did she die, Ashok? Was it malaria or...
Some sort of medical situation.
Okay. Sorry for asking.
Yeah, no.
It's 4 years old, that's a crazy time to lose your mum.
So what happened then was there were 3 kids, myself, brother and sister, probably 3 and a half, 4 and a half, 5 and a half. And in those days, it was interracial marriage, which is Indian with, Irish woman, white. So we got in a situation where the Indians looking at the, half white, half kid, and they couldn't understand it. My mum died. We went to live with them for 6 months. But then at 4 and a half, I went to Ireland. I went to boarding school in Dublin, Ireland. Spent a year in Mount Sackville in Chapel Lizard, nuns convent. Yep. And it was pretty tough with nuns. Imagine. Yeah. And then at 5 and a half, I went to Willow Park and Blackrock College till I was 18 and a half. Had a great time. 18 years old. It was fantastic,
Play any sports?
Yeah, I was pretty good at soccer. I played a bit of rugby, but not that much. Blackrock College is one of the most well-known schools in the world for rugby union.
Really?
Yeah, Brian O'Driscoll is from Blackrock College.
Oh, wow.
We had some other people like Bob Geldof from the Boomtown Rats.
That's right. I did remember reading that.
Yeah, so there's quite a few people like that. So I was a boarder at school from 4 and a half till I was 18. Spent 3 months every year with my dad in East Africa. But the rest of the time I was at school.
And so he was just, he's practicing a doctor?
He practiced in East Africa as a doctor. And once a year we saw parents, or 3 months a year, but you get used to it, you know.
Was it hard? You remember back 5 years old? Being
Oh,
away
look,
from your
look, I
family
think,
for
look,
that long?
I went back last year and with 100 people for a 50-year reunion, and they asked me to speak for the school, you know, and I was telling them some of the things I came out with. I said, look, when I was 5, and I said, how do you survive in a situation with all these people around you, priests and all that? And I became the best friend of the biggest, roughest, toughest people in the whole school. And I went through 13 years at Willow Park and Blackrock, and I never got in one fight.
Awesome.
Nobody would go near me because I was friends with everybody else.
Well, that's what you want.
That's all. You know, you learn that it's survival. But I mean, I think, and I say to people in life that come from backgrounds that are difficult and stuff, you deal with the hand you're given in life. And that's what you do. A lot of people do it, you know, I mean, and, you know, you just do what you need to do.
Just to keep moving forward.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Mate, so any memorable moments from your time at Blackrock?
Oh, look, I loved it there. I was there 13 and a half years. It was different then. I mean, you're talking about in the 70s, 60s, 70s, you know, where things were different. I mean, in Ireland, I mean, and I've explained to people before, you know, when we were young, we were 12, 13, we were going to the pub and having a pint.
Pint of Guinness?
Yeah. You'd never do that now.
Absolutely not. You wouldn't bloody allow anyone into the exchange or the gold bar at bloody 12.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, things have changed.
Yep.
It's like drink driving years ago compared to what it is now. But the school was very good. I made a lot of friends. I'm actually chairman of the Blackrock College, Australia and New Zealand, of all the people in Australia and New Zealand from Blackrock College.
Wow.
Which I was appointed about a year ago. But fantastic people, fantastic country, and it's just a really great people. The Irish are really terrific.
Yeah, they are,
Yeah.
aren't they? Growing up in this, as you said, the 60s and the 70s, what was Ireland like at the time?
Look, I think really Ireland was, at that time when I was there was a lot of political situations.
The IRA up and about, car bombings?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, when you look at it, there's Southern Ireland, Northern Ireland. So Ireland's 32 counties, 6 up north, 26 down south. So there was a lot of things about the IRA and English soldiers in Belfast and stuff like that. So
that's where my grandfather's from. My
Is it?
grandfather's from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Worked in the shipyards where the Titanic was built.
I was there 2 years ago.
Really?
I went and I stayed at the Titanic Museum. I went to the Titanic Museum at Titanic Hotel,
Wow.
which is opposite the museum. It's fantastic being up there. And
Amazing.
I'm a big soccer supporter, so I love George Best.
Who's your team?
I like Chelsea, but,
Yeah, okay.
but Manchester United. If you go to the Irish pub in Kalgoorlie, which I own, there's 2 shirts of George Best signed,
Yeah.
one Manchester United and one Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And if you come to my office, I've got a ball signed by Georgie Best.
Wow, love him.
And he was a bit of a legend.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
I mean, he's got some famous quotes, yeah?
What go? Do you remember any?
A couple of them, you know, he says, look, I spent all my money on women and booze and the rest I wasted.
Well, he obviously liked a couple of those things, didn't he?
That's right, George. And the other one was with soccer. People know soccer. He was in England. Irish bloke knocked on his door. He's in a hotel. He's in bed with Miss World, with the European Cup, the FA Cup, 50,000 euros. The Irish bloke brings in the breakfast, looks at George Best and said, looking at Miss World and looking at the cups, looking at the money, George, where did it all go wrong?
Mate, so let's move on to what did you do? What spurred on your university degree? Obviously, you're an accountant. You're a well-known bloody accountant in Kalgoorlie.
Look, I was in Dublin. I was border. I went to Africa every year. And
What were you doing while you were in Africa for those 3 months?
partying.
Pardon?
Partying.
Really?
Yeah, we used to go out. When I was young, I was 12, 13, go out drinking and just carrying on like a pork chop, which you'd never do
That's
now.
Australian.
Yeah. And just having a good time. So, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania at that time was a little bit different. So when you were over there, you hang around with a lot of the people from the other embassies and things like that. But it was a great country, and it still is today.
Yep. After high school?
Yep.
University?
Yeah, so what happened is, in Ireland, before I left school, my dad was Indian, and they kicked all the Indians and whites out of East Africa.
Why? What for?
Because they made it very difficult. So if you own 3 houses, they come and say, we're taking over your houses. Taking over your houses.
They just took them.
The sovereign risk. So my dad came back to...
Were they able to sell? Were they able to sell them?
No, just got taken over.
So they'd paid for these bloody houses,
They got taken
and someone
over.
just come and took them.
So he came back to
Corruption.
Ireland. He came back to Ireland and said, look, we're broke. We've got no money. And he said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. He says, the good news is I'm going to Australia. I've got one of those $50 pom things to go over there.
£10 pom.
£10 pom. And the bad news is I can't afford to take you over, so you're on your own. And then he says to me, which I repeated at his funeral, look, he said, Ashok, look, you've got no money, you've got nowhere to live, you've got no job, but you've got a bit of a personality. He says, if you ever do well in life, always remember where you came from. And I always say that to a lot of people. For a lot of us who do well or are good, just remember that you're the 18-year-old kid on your own that has to build a life. So treat people like you want to be treated. And I've done that my whole life.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I remember arriving in Kalgoorlie, $800 with $800 and just having the same mindset. I mean, I was 28. I partied a little bit too much when I was a few years younger than that.
Yeah, well,
but
look, I mean,
I moved here, started again.
Well, look, from New Zealand, you got a place like Kalgoorlie. Kalgoorlie, to me, you can walk into a pub, no job, no money, nothing to eat, nowhere to stay. You walk out of the pub, you've got a job, you've had a meal, they organise accommodation for you, and you're set.
Yep.
There's non-judgmental. Now, that's what I was brought up like that in Ireland. People don't care who you are, what you do for a living, everybody's the same.
So your dad left you and your brother and sister.
Yeah, my brother had moved to Australia himself.
Already? Okay.
With a girlfriend. My dad came over here, and I don't know who my sister was then. So I left there with 26 Irish blokes, and I went to a place called Hereford in England. Took the B&I line from Dunleary to Holyend, and I was down in Hereford, which is a centre of the SAS and RAF.
Wow.
And I was there, and I worked at Bulmer cider factory.
Oh, cool.
And a canning factory for 7 days a week. But there was 26 Irish blokes. And unfortunately, what happened then, there was a bomb blast in Birmingham. All these English people died. They blamed all the Irish people. So they came to the pubs where we all drank. We drank where the SAS were. And they started beating up all the Irish blokes. And they came up
Probably
to me.
not a good place to be having a fight with a whole bunch of bloody
SAS,
warriors.
But they came up to me and they looked at me and they said, are you Irish? I said, Jesus, do I
I'm
look Irish?
Indian. I'm Indian.
So there was an advantage there. No, but those days were very tough in relation to that. But had a great time over there. And then I decided, look, I'll go to Australia. And I came.
So you'd saved up some dollary dues?
Yeah, and I came to Australia. My brother, who had moved,
At what age?
I was 19 years old. My brother collected me at the airport, and he says, let's go and have a bar and have a couple of drinks. And I was drinking. Well, I didn't realise he picked me up on a motorbike, and I had all this luggage, And at that stage, he was living in Catherine Street in Subiaco.
Yep.
And I went then to Kalgoorlie, where my dad got a job.
Got the train there?
Yes, train.
I took when I first,
Indian Pacific.
I took the train to Kalgoorlie too.
I hope you got your cup of tea in the morning with a biscuit if you stay overnight.
No. I slept at the Perth airport. We landed in Perth, slept at the Perth airport, and then the next day got a taxi to East Perth train station, and then got the train to caught the train to Perth.
Well, that's where I used to live from, East Perth station. So went to Kalgoorlie, and my dad had just got a job. He was a doctor. He couldn't get a job in Perth. He went to Kalgoorlie. He got a job at the Aboriginal Medical Service. So I arrive at the house. There's one cup, one saucer, one teaspoon.
Yep.
And
the bachelor's pad.
Yeah. So I got a job with he organised a friend of his a job at KLV, which is now Northern Star, which is a super pit, as a greaser. And I worked there for about a year, and I used to have grease all over me when I came home. I used to go to the Foundry Hotel, get drunk, and then go to Sylvester's and have a great time there. And those were the days when you could do that.
Sylvester's is now a gaming centre or
Yes,
something.
yes.
Right? I went there. You bought it, did you?
Yeah, I bought it in '87.
Okay, don't go down that road, because we've got some bloody Kalgoorlie carry-on coming up.
So I came to Australia, went to Kalgoorlie for a year, worked in the mines for a year, and then I said, "Oh Jesus, I better do something and get a real job, get a haircut and get a real job."
But you never got a haircut.
No, well, I told Wayne Bramwell the other day when I saw him on your interview, I said, "Get a haircut and get a real job."
Well, he's got a bloody great job, and his hair's beautiful. I'm going to grow mine too.
He's a terrific bloke. And then I decided to go to university and to do a degree, a Bachelor of Business.
Awesome.
And I went to Wait, which is now Curtin University, in 1975.
Yep.
For a 3-year degree. 1976, I had an economics teacher called Colin Barnett, the Premier of West Australia.
Wow.
Later on, Had a great time at uni, partying and, doing a bit of studying and stuff like that.
Seems to be the common trend with people going to university.
Yeah, we had a great time there. I got interviewed by the university 2 years ago, and they said to me, "Oh, look, Ashok, what's the best part of being at university? What's your memories?" And I said, "Do you want me to be honest with you?" I said, "Look, I used to love being in the guild, drinking, getting drunk, partying, etc. like that, and playing soccer. And all my mates then were Malaysian or Chinese or stuff, and none of them drank. They were just studying the form, the dogs, the horses, etc. And they couldn't believe that I said that, because normally people say, "Oh, studies and all that sort of stuff."
Well, you've just been honest.
Yeah.
That's what it should be.
So I did my degree 75 to 78, and then I decided I had to get a haircut and get a real job. And I joined a firm called Western James.
Ernst & Young?
Which became Ernst & Young. Western James became Dewsbury's, Ernst & Winnie, and then Ernst & Young.
Right.
I did my chartered accountant in 79. I became chairman of the Young Chartered Accountants of West Australia.
Awesome.
In 1982. And there are other people, well-known people. Mel Ashton was my deputy chairman.
Who's Mel Ashton?
He's chairman of 5 public listed companies. Ian McIver was also on that board. He was a chairman of Western Areas. A lot of mining people there. And I had a great time. We had a big firm, great firm to work for, Western James, which became Dewsbury's, Ernst & Winnie, and then Ernst & Young. Got a lot of experience there. And then I decided, look, you're in a firm, 25 partners, 6 managers. I was the youngest manager there. Look, I'll go to Kalgoorlie and set up my own accounting firm. At that stage, I was married with 2 kids, and I just gave everything up.
How old were the kids?
The kids would have only been about, I think, 2 and 3 at that time.
What are your kids' names?
Sean and Siobhan. And I was originally married to an Irish woman called Anne. She passed away 2 years ago. But I went to Kalgoorlie, and I basically said, I'm going to set up my own accounting firm. So I rented an office for $50 a week, and I did something very unusual. I went to the television station, and I said, I want to do TV commercials. And this is VEW8. You're talking about 1978.
Wow.
They said, well, you want to advertise on TV? I said, yeah. And they said to me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to do my own commercials. They said, no, you don't do commercials. We do them. They never had a person on TV that stood up there and talked. I said, no, I want to do my own commercials. So I said, hi, I'm Ashok Parekh. I'm a chartered accountant. I want to know, do you need tax advice? Do you need help lodging previous year returns? Do you need this, that, whatever? And it was quite interesting because within 6 months, everybody saw the ads. And when you go down the street, say, oh, you're the dickhead on TV. So, I mean, it was quite interesting, but it got out there. 6 months later, we had a big fair in Kalgoorlie, got back on TV, said, in appreciation of support I've received, I'm going to give you free tax advice, free financial advice, free advice at the community fair. So I'm back on TV.
Beautiful. And
so I was very media orientated at that time. And those days, for 60 minutes, you'd pay $60 for a commercial, which I thought was very cheap then. I didn't have any money, but and that's what we did. Yeah. So it was VUW8 at that time, which now is probably one of the big ones at the moment, which is the regional Kalgoorlie. But it was very interesting those days.
What was Kalgoorlie? Let's get into what was Kalgoorlie like when you arrived. So you arrived there in what, 1978? Did you say?
No, I arrived in Kalgoorlie originally in 74.
I mean, when you went back
When I went back was 1984.
to start your accounting firm.
Yeah, it was 1984.
41 and a half years ago.
And it was interesting in that, like, I was a young chartered accountant. I was very cocky and thought, I'll take over this world and you just do things. But I didn't realize at the time that when you break into towns, sometimes it's not that easy. People,
They got the click.
They got the click, So, and I found that a little bit difficult initially, but I learned myself, look, you just got to be yourself.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you arrived, was there the Kalgoorlie mafia?
Look, I would certainly say from my observations when I got there, not mafia in the term of, what you normally think.
Not the Italian mafia,
but there was groups of people there which controlled what was going on in town. And in fact, I picked up a couple of clients and I got people bringing me up saying, look, you'll never do well here unless you're friends of ours. And I said, well, I'm born and brought up in Ireland. I'm friends with everybody, so I'm not going to associate myself with people to get business, yeah?
Obviously over the course of my chats with multiple people, I was down in the Wembley Hotel chatting to a bloke who knows you very well. And I said to him, mate, can you tell me about this Kalgoorlie mafia that I've heard about for all these years? Do you know anything about this Kalgoorlie mafia? And he said to me, I'm in the Kalgoorlie mafia. And I said, oh, shit, okay, tell me about it. Because my understanding or interpretation of every time I'd ever heard someone reference the Kalgoorlie mafia. And actually, Ashok, the other thing that people did say to me was, Ashok Parekh is the Don of the Kalgoorlie mafia.
Yeah. It's all fake news. Yes,
yeah, for sure.
All fake news. Look, I think really what people say is if you're influential and people like you, and it applies to politicians. You're politically correct, and get on with everybody. People think that you have influence within the community and stuff like that, and they would say, well, that's a very influential person. So, but I've always treated people exactly like I want to be treated.
I treat people the way that they, that they treat me.
And I think really, look, I mean, I don't think that, the tag of the mafia when I first arrived applied any time after that. There are people that were very influential, but they're genuinely very good for the community.
Yeah.
And they get things done. Yeah.
I thought it would have been, the old days when, a deal was done down the pub. And I thought it would be, and I mean, look, deals are probably still done down the pub in Kalgoorlie. I also thought, the mafia, the Italian mafia was all run on a favour for a favour. They did lots of other criminal activities, but my interpretation of the Kalgoorlie mafia was always, it'll just be someone saying, hey, listen, I looked after you. Don't forget that one day you'll look after me.
Look, I agree with you there. I've never seen, look, I've been there since 84, and I've never seen any things like that. Look, there are people who are influential there and who, stand up in the community and make statements like myself, and which people may like or dislike, but you're being honest. And what you're doing is you're doing everything best for the community, So, yep. To answer that question, I don't know anything about the Kalgoorlie mafia, but I know a lot of people.
That's good. We've cleared that. We've bloody cleared that up, all right? Stay tuned. Coming up next episode is part 2 of the Ashok Parekh story.